Hello, welcome back to another episode of Cooking in the Quads. This week I'm going to be showing you guys how to make one of my favorite vegetables, talking about Brussels sprouts, and I'm going to show you a cool little way to incorporate some different flavors into there and make it a kind of interesting dish on its own or as a side dish to meals, and I hope you guys enjoy. So, for the ingredients for today's dish, we are going to need a cooking oil, some Parmesan cheese, some maple syrup, and of course some Brussels sprouts. Okay, so to start things off, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our Brussels sprouts and we're just going to wash them off real quick. Always good to wash your produce before you start working with it, just to get any dirt or anything that might be on there still off from it. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut the Brussels sprouts, and very simply I'm just going to cut them in half. Just going to cut all these Brussels sprouts right in half, and then the next step that we're going to do after this is we're going to put about an inch and a half of water in our frying pan, and what we're going to do is we're going to start by steaming these Brussels sprouts. So the reason I like to start steaming Brussels sprouts before I end up frying them is because Brussels sprouts are pretty hard originally, so if you steam them, you kind of allow them to get a softer texture going. And then at the end, after they've kind of softened up, I begin to fry them to get more of a crispy edge kind of taste to them. So just going to finish cutting these up. Try not to lose any fingers. They don't have to be perfectly in half, just about half is kind of a good thing to aim for. Makes them easier to cook instead of the whole thing. Also, I find it better when you fry them at the end. If you kind of cook them mainly on their bottom half, they tend to crisp up a little bit nicer. So it's another reason I prefer cutting them in half. Okay, so we've got all our Brussels sprouts in half. We're going to take our frying pan and put about an inch around the base of the pan of water. About like that. I don't know if you can see that well, but looks about an inch. And I'm going to go ahead and set it on, I'll say medium heat. And for the steaming part, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to throw them all in there together and let them cook on that medium heat and throw a lid over this so that it can steam cook it. So I'm going to let those kind of steam up. I would say it's probably going to take about five minutes or so. Depends on what heat you kind of end up using. You can choose to cook them on a higher heat or a lower heat. You're just kind of watching until they get that like bright green color, and you can kind of start getting this like strong, I guess a little bit of a pungent kind of Brussels sprout smell, and that'll kind of tell you they're about ready to turn into the frying process. And you can also kind of just take the lid off and poke them with whatever you're using, like a spatula or something, and see if they're like squishy yet. So I will see you guys in about 5 minutes. Okay, so I think it's been closer to about 7 or 8 minutes, but our Brussels sprouts have kind of gotten to this darker, more vibrant green than before. So we're going to go ahead and drain the water out. I'm just holding the cover on top while I drain it out. And then we won't need the cover anymore, so we can just put that in the sink. And we're going to put our Brussels back on the burner, and we're going to take some of our oil. Just give it some oil so that it doesn't stick on the pan while you're frying it. I'm just going to go ahead and move that around, get them all coated in the oil. And I'm going to put it a little past medium heat because I want it to get these sort of crispy edges on the Brussels sprouts. Now I'm going to try to flip each Brussels sprout so that it's like face down on the frying pan. Sometimes it can be a little tedious, but I think it makes it come out the best way. Probably a little bit of a weird transition here. Had someone come in and have to fill up their water bottle, but something that's important when you're frying these, especially on a higher than medium heat, you want to make sure you're keeping them moving pretty often. If you keep them too stagnant on a high heat, that's how things get stuck to the bottom of the pan. So I just kind of like to pick it up every once in a while and just make sure all the Brussels sprouts are moving across the pan. You can also use your spatula if you don't want to pick up the pan. If you feel more comfortable keeping it down, you can just push things around that way and make sure they're still gliding over the surface and whatnot. So when you're frying them, again, you're probably just going to play it by ear depending on what setting you put it on medium, high, or in between one of those two things. You're just kind of looking for the edges to kind of crisp up. You're looking to flip the Brussels sprouts over and see a little bit of black, just to get like that kind of crunchy, not like a burnt, but like a crispy flavor to them. So again, I might say 5 minutes to give you a ballpark, but it depends on how many Brussels sprouts you're cooking, the size of your pan. I'm using a pretty big pan and cooking a lot of Brussels sprouts, so I'm gonna play it by ear, and I will see you guys in a little bit. Okay, so our Brussels sprouts have crisped up a little bit. I think you can see that a little bit. So we're gonna go ahead and plate them, put them in this bowl. Alright, and then last thing we're going to do to put some finishing touches on them, we're going to take our maple syrup, we're going to give it a little once over. This gives a little sweetness to the dish. And then to contrast that, I like to use some Parmesan cheese, which gives it a bit of a sharp kind of flavor. So just get some of that on there. Mix it around. And then one thing I forgot to mention from the ingredients that we're also going to use is some black pepper just to finish it off. And there you have it. Here's our Brussels sprout dish. I hope you guys enjoyed.